Hello, I'm Adrian, and today we're taking an in-depth look at Superman's fighting style in the DC Extended Universe. Superman is one of the most popular heroes in the world, and made a triumphant return to the world of cinema in Man of Steel after the disappointing Superman Returns. He then went on to star in Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, and we most recently saw him in Justice League. We've gotten a pretty good handle on his fighting style, so now seems to be a great time to determine just how many fighting styles Superman is familiar with. If you're a fan of superheroes in film, I highly recommend subscribing to my channel and watching my other videos, as I've already analyzed other DC superheroes including DC Extended Universe Batman, CW Supergirl, and Arkham Batman, which I highly recommend watching as his list of skills is insane. I've also already made videos breaking down the individual fight scenes in Man of Steel and Batman vs Superman extensively, going into camera angles, choreography, and story. You can see any of these videos on their dedicated playlists, which are in the description below. But today we will be focusing exclusively on Superman. The goal of these videos is to figure out just how many fighting styles our combatant is familiar with by analyzing the specific moves featured in their fight scenes and pairing them with the martial art or fighting style which most aptly represents those moves. And yes, to clarify, there's a huge amount of crossover in martial arts techniques. A technique that is present in one fighting style may also be present in another, but in order to not give combatants multiple fighting styles for the sake of variety, I have instead opted to list the most apt fighting style that best represents that particular technique. Also, there are various degrees of knowing a fighting style, and although one may know elements of something, this doesn't mean I'm saying the fighter I'm talking about is a master in every style I mention. This analysis relies solely on what has so far been seen in the DC Extended Universe. Or in other words, the skills Clark Kent or Kal-El has demonstrated in Man of Steel, Batman vs Superman Dawn of Justice, and Justice League. Fighting styles that Superman may know in the comics or any other medium do not count. Without further ado, let's take a look at how many fighting styles Superman knows in the DC Extended Universe. Superman is a being who can fly, is bulletproof, and has immense strength. We're talking strength that is capable of pulling ships, catching rockets, and even taking nukes to the face and surviving it. So he doesn't really need a whole lot of formal training to wreck some stuff up. As a matter of fact, Zod makes fun of this by throwing Superman's upbringing into his face by yelling, "Where did you train? On a farm?" That being said, Superman seems to have picked up on certain martial arts techniques naturally, and has incorporated them into his overall fighting style. What comes to mind when you think of Superman fighting? Him throwing an incredibly powerful punch. As I've said many times before, there's a whole myriad of ways in which to throw a punch, and judging by his actions in the DC Extended Universe, Superman looks to incorporate a karate style of punching as well as a boxing style of punching. In both schools, the basics of the punch remain the same. Curl your hand into a fist and strike with your knuckles. However, the way you get there is pretty different. In karate, when one arm extends for the punch, the other retracts. Think of it as a push-pull mechanism. You can see by Superman's positioning here that he's prepping his fist for another punch as he unleashes one, signaling karate technique. He also executes a really cool back fist with Batman, a technique that hails from karate. Meanwhile, in boxing, you want to keep both hands beside your face at all times, and each one of your punches operates independently from the other. So if you're throwing a jab, hook, cross, or uppercut with one hand, the other remains completely immobile, staying right by your cheek to protect yourself from someone counterattacking. In Superman's case, you can see him demonstrate elements of boxing as well, but him not being a trained fighter, it's not surprising that his form isn't absolutely perfect. And when he isn't punching someone into another stratosphere, he's either throwing them, tackling them, or performing a devastating headlock. Throws and grappling techniques are abundant in several martial arts, judo, jiu-jitsu, and aikido to name a few, but the way in which he performs these techniques most closely resembles pro wrestling. In pro wrestling, it's all about the showmanship, the power, the speed, and that suits Superman's fighting style perfectly. Sure, the headlocks in wrestling don't end fatally the way it did with Zod, but the technique remains the same. And as far as the tackling and throwing goes, it's essentially the same thing as in pro wrestling, just with 100 times more power than in the ring. Superman also has two other incredible abilities that he can rely on, and those are heat vision and freeze breath. He's essentially capable of generating lasers out of his eyes just like his cousin Supergirl, and can direct the beam as well as the intensity of the laser depending on his concentration. He obviously needs to use different levels of intensity when he's trying to heal Lois Lane versus firing at Doomsday. His freeze breath does just that, freeze any object or person it comes into contact with. Since human beings aren't capable of doing either of these things in real life, the closest we can come to this is firing weapons. And for that skill, we turn to action shooting. Action shooting is a category within sports shooting which places great emphasis on movement and speed as well as precision. Superman needs to be able to shoot perfectly while on the move or while being attacked, as his enemies will never give him an extra second to line up the perfect shot. So in conclusion, how many fighting styles does Superman know? They are karate, boxing, pro wrestling, and action shooting, which brings us to a grand total of 4 fighting styles. Which is your favorite fighting style? What did you think of Justice League? Let me know in the comments below and subscribe for more superhero and film content. See you next time.